Lue Elizondo has gone on a media tour promoting Imminent, obviously. He had a big day with both the NewsNation interview dropping and on the same day earlier on the Joe Rogan Experience. Lou broke it all down, man. We're going to talk about a lot of things that he discussed. What will it mean for disclosure, if anything? And how come, once again, broken record, none of the major media outlets were covering it? It is down to earth. It is UAP Tuesdays with myself and my buddy Mark Reilly. Let's do it. It is UAP Tuesday. Here we go. All right, welcome back to UAP Tuesday. And look who's back. It's the odious Mark Reilly. What's up, Mark?
How are you, Kristian? It's very nice being back.
Nice to have you back. Oh, and what a week to be back.
One.
What a week to be back.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's like there was so much. And the book, did you order a copy of Imminent?
I will be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have it.
It's on my list of Amazon things that I need to do. That and diapers and all the other
Understood.
assorted things.
I just started reading it last night, and now that I've watched these interviews and stuff, it basically has a foreword from Chris Mellon that talks about this working with Lou, the overall thing, and listening to Lou's journey of what really went down, how he got the gig, talking to Lukatsky and all that. What you watched the NewsNation one, right?
Yeah, watch the NewsNation, Joe Rogan, a bunch of those clips. Following up on the news as best as I can. NewsNation was great though. The some of the things that he's shared with everyone, what he went through, what his family went through was very, very interesting. Because it kind of, one of the questions that you inevitably have is like, and they address it in this, he's grifting, he's lying, he's whatever. That family was really affected through all this, went through some really hard times. I mean, the fact the wife is, picking up jobs at Target and Home Depot. It's crazy to consider all this.
Well, it is. I mean, there's obviously nothing wrong with having those jobs, but from where you're going, I know you're saying
going from here to here. Yeah, I'm not talking.
I know
about,
what you mean.
I know you're working at Target.
Having a government job and having that cushy job of running the program, to then having that his wife had to go and take a job at wherever it might be. That was telling for sure. But there was so much. But I want to start with, you mentioned the NewsNation thing. Mm-hmm. What I will say and what I will always say, Ross Coldhart is doing an incredible job on bringing this story. He is still, because I still stick by the fact, NewsNation went from posting, this last week, they have been posting 2 or 3 videos a day, it seems like, of the topic. And when you look at their numbers, you understand why. But because they're doing very well when they do these little clip outs. But they were at one point posting 2 to 3 videos a day. It was just like habit of what they were doing. And then they stopped. And I still don't know the answer, if it's whether because Ross Coldhart said, listen, I'll be official with you guys. I want to be the guy. I want to put my show out. That'll be our main topic. And especially obviously when there's big topics and you guys cover that throughout. I don't know if that's the case, but it seemed like maybe, because he's the guy. He's doing every week, is interviewing and bringing this stuff up. I don't like the way they rolled this interview out. I think it was way too old school, and I think they promoted it like a movie that they were getting out. They said, here's this guy that we have, this big interview. Here's a couple of clips 5 days before the interview, and then we drop it on Friday. Well, guess what happened? They had this whole big interview, and then Rogan shot with this guy on the day before and then released it the day after and beat them to the punch by like 4 hours. And it's like, and a lot of the stuff that Lou talked about in the first half was all stuff he talked about with Rogan. So I had already heard all of it with Rogan, but then they got to the second half of it, which is stuff that was really fascinating. Whether it was the confirmation of the remote viewing, whether it was a confirmation of like the fact that there's actual chips from these things that are the abductions and all that. I mean, there's some scary stuff that was kind of confirmed inside of this interview. No?
Oh yeah. It's there's so many thoughts I have.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know how News Nation likes to put these out, but we always say, what else is going on in the world that might take away from anything kind of breaking through. The election, all the elections heating up, and boy, I mean, we haven't even seen each other for a while. So, I mean, last time I saw you, Joe Biden was going to be running.
Right.
So, there's a lot going on. That I don't know if you're referring to that, why it doesn't go bigger, or just News Nation in general, just kind of missing, the chance to strike. But in regards to the abduction thing, is one that has been strangely absent, I feel, in a lot of the conversations that we've been having. It's always kind of an afterthought. It was really kind of nice to see this kind of topic come right into like center stage almost. And that is something that I've heard before, that I have a friend that I've mentioned many times on this show that has believed that he's been abducted, that does believe he had an implant. And that one scared the, pardon my French, shit out of me.
Right.
Yeah. That's scary as hell. And then to kind of correlate it to the remote viewing as a way that these things kind of gravitate to certain people that might have psychic capabilities or are prone to it, right. Whatever it may be, these people that then have perhaps gone on to be remote viewers have that unlocked somehow through the whole process. Seeing the image, if it's alleged image of this actual implant, it looks straight out of a sci-fi movie, which, right. You could say, well, that's the point. Maybe that's part of the grift. Who knows? However you want to say it. I have somebody who I trust, who is a friend, a dear friend at that, that believes, has many, many recollections of being abducted and whatnot with an implant in them. They keep showing up to the same people that they say they kind of find these people somehow. That's really kind of blowing my mind a lot, because it's kind of confirmation from hearing it from my friend for all these years, and then to like hear Lue go into this. Whew, that's a lot to take.
Well, yeah, it is. But the other thing is that there's a lot to it.
And first of all of this is a lot to
it. But you just said beforehand about how, well, you don't really hear that much about when it comes to this stuff that we're talking about, the abductions thing, kind of pushed to the side. And I think that's because I don't think you get any more taboo about it than until you get to the fact that, well, these things are abducting people and putting chips in them. You tell that to the average person that's not following this. If you would have told us this a year ago, when because you and I are covering this, we pay attention to all the stuff that's happening in the world now with Congress, with the lead up to all this. It's very similar to what Lue Elizondo was talking about, that disclosure is not going to be a thing that just happens overnight. It's a gradual thing, and it's setting people up to get used to it. Well, I think that is the case with like you and I, right? Where we've been covering this for over a year. So we hear things like this now, and it's a little bit, it's still nuts when you hear it, but it's like, oh, if it's all involved with everything else to it, and then there's all these other people. But if you bring up the average person and they say, oh, you cover that UFO stuff, and you're like, that's
the story that they go, oh yeah, did you get that from the Inquirer?
Right. And then I say, I'm like, yeah, they had a thing, this guy talked about alien abductions and chips inside of people's heads. And they'd be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right. And exactly, right over the head, because it's like,
that's straight out of a movie.
That's what Lue said as much. It's science fiction, it is. But what it also is that it's interesting now. If you look at what the Soul Foundation said when we were covering those videos back before the Schumer Rounds Act got gutted, but when they were talking about those videos about how they wanted to do planned disclosure and how that was going to play, it was this kind of gradual bit of information that looks to be happening currently. Because the reason I say that is the first wave of it is, okay, well, the government has these things. They have these ships. Here's David Grush. Here's Fravor. Here's Graves. Here's these people who are saying that these things, what is it flying around in the sky? We have people out in Congress who are saying, what is this stuff flying around in the sky? Well, now you got a guy who was running this program, who, by the way, was also showed documentation that Harry Reid also said this was the guy that was running the show. And here's a guy who's not only saying there's things flying around in the sky, he's saying it's non-human intelligence. He's talking about these things, putting chips in people's heads. He's talking about this is like, Now this is a thing where it's like, wait a minute. Wait, this isn't just what's going on in the sky. This is what the hell is this? Because the other thing that is concerning to me, and this is something that not everybody agrees with, and I don't know what to agree with or not agree with, but Lue has been making a lot of different claims, and especially the fact that he's not convinced that these things are benevolent. And that's the part of it. He's like, because his rationale behind it is sound. And it's okay. Well, look, this is what he said on Rogan. He's like, how do you, if they have an interest in nukes, and if they are benevolent, well, then how come they didn't stop Hiroshima? If they are benevolent, how come they haven't stopped other countries from building these things? How come they haven't disarmed these things in general? How come? And there could be answers to all that question. This is just his rationale behind it. And he said, if there's other things, if they're shutting down nukes, he also turned on nukes with the Russians at one point too. That whole report. So there's not a clear-cut sign of it, and that's also one of the reasons of getting the information out. But that's just a smidgen of what he talked about on both Rogan and the other thing. What do you make of all that stuff?
Where do I start? I don't know. I mean, are they benevolent? Maybe not. Are they just watching us and studying us and grabbing people that they believe can be? Well, see, that's the part that if we talk about benevolency and they are not stopping Hiroshima or they're arming nukes somehow, and then they're studying and implanting people, then that gives signs. It's a sign to me that they have a bigger plan.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? There's something else that we're not thinking about or yet to be revealed. I do not know what to make of it. It's hard to then, when you add in the abduction part of it, the implantation, we've been talking about the theme that these things kind of appear around nuclear facilities, and Lue goes into interesting, like Operation Interloper, I believe it was called, where they're going to set a honey trap to try to capture one of these things. We can talk about that later, but that if they are trying to trap these things into figuring out what they're doing.
Well, they tried. They
tried. They killed it. They squashed it. The highest. It went right up. There was a lot of people that wanted to do it, and then they squashed it at the highest level.
So Reilly's talking about is that there was a thing. Basically, what Lue and other people had tried to push forward was that they found that these things in the sky could be taken down by the electronic
electromagnetic wave.
And they found it out. So he was going to pitch it to try to push this through, and then it was squashed. And then Ross kind of follows up and asks him, is this something that they already knew the answer to that? It's like, some of them that knew it. And they also get into a whole thing about this secret kind of religious group that's in the Pentagon that is partially thinking, and we've heard this before. Many people comment over that, whether it's thinking these things are demons or whatever the hell they think it is. And he's talking about how that kind of correlates and in sections of the government alone. So there's so much going on inside of all of that. Like,
there's a lot of layers now.
Yeah, there is. And that's why I think, like, overall, what they covered and kind of in depth of what Ross was doing, I think was maybe a little bit more prepared and researched than Rogan's. But Rogan is more conversational and just,
that's his show.
That's his show.
He's going to have wherever it goes, it goes.
Right, because there are some criticisms where people are like, well, there was no research done by Joe. I'm like, but that's not his show. His show, he wanted to have the conversation about what this guy did
right then and there. So he's like,
and that was it.
Asking questions.
There were certain things that he didn't ask. I don't even necessarily know if he knew that Lue was the guy that helped put forward the video for the 2017 New York Times. He might have, but there was something that when he was talking about it, he didn't bring that up with Lue. But there's certain things that, people who are really diving into this all the time would have probably asked Lue. Rogan certainly has an interest in this topic and has talked to many people inside of the subject and the important side of it, because I saw some people going, well, it didn't dive as deep in this one. I was like, yeah, but Lue says it himself. The reason why this was so important is that interview on Rogan's channel alone, on the channel, not on Spotify. I don't even know what it did on Spotify. 1.3 million thus far. Yeah. So that's 1.3 million people that finally got to hear, because guess what? The whatever amount of million people or whoever it is that's watching the news networks didn't have a chance to hear this guy because they didn't have him on. CBS News had him on. CBS Morning Show had him on. That was
did they?
Yeah, CBS Morning Show had him on for 7 minutes or something less. And this is the stuff that you and I talk about all of the time. That this is the same thing where, because I saw somebody comment of like, well, why I don't remember what it was. The reason why they didn't have him on is because they don't like to have people on who are lying. Okay, well, let's start there. Let's say he is lying. Okay, this is a guy who they know has worked inside the government. Even if the people have said, well, no, he didn't work for that program. It's not true. Many people, they say that as well, and he shows the documentation of Harry Reid saying that he did. But there are people who say that he didn't. Okay, let's say that he didn't. Well, then if you have an opportunity as a reporter to expose this guy and to say, okay, let's hear all your claims. Come on in. Why, as a reporter, would you not want him on your show to say, okay, wait a minute, or convince me? Convince me why. How many reporters have you seen in sports who think that somebody had made the wrong decision or did something and challenges the person in general, right? You have that person on, you say, okay, look, here I am. I'm from CNN, I'm from Fox News, and we're going to have it on Lue Elizondo, who had this, and okay, so you claim that you worked here. How do you prove that? Okay, this, and this. All right, you say remote viewing. Tell me about this. Okay, why should I believe that? Go after it, as opposed to ignoring it. Like, it's the same conversation. I know some people are like, oh, here we go, talking about this again. Yeah, it's the same conversation. People are ignoring this shit.
Yeah, it always goes back for me that just, Soul Foundation talks about the gradual rollout of this, that, news outlets, they're not covering it because do they just think this is fiction, period? And nobody's going to believe it. Everybody's going to think he's a crackpot and a grifter and just lying. And it is outlandish. It is hard to believe. But is this guy playing the long game?
But Reilly, this isn't some guy they found off the street.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
That's what I mean. But by the long game, though, it's like he starts it here. He has to go through hell with almost losing his family, losing his home, wife taking on jobs just to make ends meet, all these different things just to get to this point to sell the book,
right?
Which a lot of people say.
That's what people say. Oh yeah, he just wants to sell a book. One book though. One book.
After 30 years of service and doing this for so long. That's why I say the long game.
Right.
So then you have the news networks that are not covering this because one, there's an election going on, and that's all they're doing is covering that. But I think because at the end of the day, these places and the people that aren't following it along like we are just immediately go, no, that's not true.
I know.
They can't wrap their head around it. They don't want to wrap their head around it. They hear implants, they're gone. They might chill out with you for a little bit when they go, something was seen over the Nimitz and it flew like this. And there's the footage that the Tic Tac and they show, oh, I saw that. Yeah. Then I played golf, whatever it may be. It's like in one ear, out the other, and it happens over and over again. And I have to believe it's just because people just don't want to believe it. Period. End of story.
But there's a chance of nothing else. There's a point when you're being you don't want to hear it, and then there's a point of just negligent reporting, and that would also get to the point of like, well, what happens next with the hearings, right? Because I feel that when there's smoke, there's fire, and the more and more we keep hearing about, we're going to get more hearings. Pavel had on Matt Laszlo, and Matt Laszlo said there's going to be 2 hearings, and he said there's going to be 2 in September. When I spoke to Lester Nare, who runs the UAPcaucus.com, he brought up a great thought that he thinks it should be in November after whoever it is that wins the election wins, and then you can focus in on whatever you're doing. Now, granted, they won't be sworn in yet, but it at least is not, you're not sidetracked by the election anymore. But it looks like September, October is still what they're aiming for. Now, the question they asked Lue on NewsNation was, would you testify? Resounding yes, is that he said he would. This is something that probably will happen now with the exposure that he's had. And if he's going to, and this would also, you would assume, I mean, maybe not, because people are always, there's people who just don't believe this guy, but if he's out there in front of Congress now putting his family at risk by lying, if this is all BS, you would, at least to me, bring him a little more validity if he's actually swearing an oath that all this stuff is true in front of Congress.
That's absolutely what he should do. I would hope that they don't do the hearings in September or October. You mentioned the election. They should do it afterwards because, again, nobody will pay attention, I don't think, unless it's just absolutely unheard of stuff coming out and he's on and he's sworn in and people come out, and whether it's whistleblowers or witnesses and eyewitnesses, all that, to make any kind of waves on this thing, we need some kind of disclosure that people can go, oh, they're up in front of Congress, our trusted elected leaders, taking an oath saying that this is real. I think it can just get, marred in all of the election coverage right now because that's what they're going to focus on. But that aside, if it does happen, let's just say, I mean, we need that. We need Lue to go out there and testify. I think that would just bring a lot of legitimacy. And look, if you're talking business, you want to sell a book, I think that would sell your book very well. If people are like, yeah, this guy testified in front of Congress.
And he said he wanted to do that anyway, as far as Congress goes. Sure. But besides him, we'll talk about it in a second of who else we think should be there to testify. And before we even do that, I wanted to thank you guys for being here and to thank our sponsors because we can't do this show without them. It keeps us on the air. Yes, we do have channel memberships now, and we do exclusive videos. Don't worry, every Monday through Friday, you still get the normal videos, so whether you're a member or not. But if you want to join and be a member today, you can. But if you want to help out and you want to get one of the sponsors, I'll tell you about both Factor and BetterHelp right now. Here you go. Guys, thanks for watching the show. Really appreciate you being here. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear about somebody I love, and that's Factor. Factor, to me, the meals are just delicious. And with sunny days here, fueling up with Factor is there's no prep, there's no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus. Factory's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, and they're ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always find time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. I cannot tell you guys, we have been working on this studio. We have been doing stuff, and Brett, who is here, if you don't know Brett is one of the best. He's a producer, and he works on this studio, and he's gotten it looking really, really good. Well, Brett gets hungry. I said, Brett, guess what? I got some good meals for you, and we got Factor. And Brett's been most energy I've seen him running around because he's been eating well with Factor. They have 35 meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, and you'll always have new flavors to explore. You got to treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. So if you head to factormeals.com/DTE50, you use that code DTE50, you'll get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code DTE50 at factormeals.com/DTE50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while subscription is active. Get it. You'll thank me for it. I appreciate it. This episode of Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me ask you, what are your self-care non-negotiables? What is it, that you never skip a leg day or therapy day? Because when your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Because even when we know what makes us happy, it is hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Therapy is very important. I've been in that position, man, when I haven't talked and I've let things bottled up, and it is not a good thing. You got to talk to people. And we've had people on our show that have said, listen, we've needed to speak to people. We had an opportunity to, and BetterHelp has been there for a lot of people very close in my life. Because if you don't know, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, it is flexible, and it is suited to your schedule. All you have to do is you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you switch therapists anytime, no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. You got to visit betterhelp.com/DTE today. You get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/DTE. All right. Thank you to our friends over at BetterHelp and Factor. As I mentioned before the break, when you sign up to one of our wonderful sponsors, you not only help out the show, you get yourself something that you need. So thank you once again to BetterHelp and Factor. All right, Riley, before the break, man, we were talking about other people that could potentially come in. And I think that one of the things that they covered in this Lue Elizondo interview with Ross Coulthart, and certainly they pun intended, dove into it with Rogan, was the under the water, the ocean stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And there has been a heavy push on, USOs, and what they basically, the reason why they call them UAPs now is because they don't even call it, this is what he described on Rogan, is that it's not unidentified aerial phenomena anymore. It's anomalous because they can come from everywhere. And then one of the theories, or one of the hypotheses, could be that these things have been here forever and they've been living under the water forever, and their technology has been able to sustain and travel under there. But if you have that element of going into the USOs, you got to have Timothy Gallaudet as one of those witnesses, you would assume. And he's already talked about it, whether it was on our show, whether it was in general. He's talked about how he wants to testify. Lue Elizondo wants to testify. Carl Nell, I assume, would testify. Those are people you got to get. You got to get Lukatsky, by the way. I mean, after hearing this stuff with Lue, you got to get that guy. You get that guy, and I think it's, I figured, but I remember correctly, I think that he said he didn't want to testify. I think he said that to Corbell. Am I wrong about that?
I thought that was true. I can't cite it off the top of my head, but I thought that rings a bell.
When he was talking about breaching the hull.
Yeah. These are we need those guys.
Yes.
We need a lot of that. We need the experts, the eyewitnesses, to testify, to be under oath, and to show that they're willing to, when you're under oath, in front of a Senate hearing, you're at risk. If you're lying, you'll pay for that, and so, because that's going to move a needle. I don't know if it's the needle, because we do have to get, not like a shared experience of seeing it all, like Independence Day, like we always say, but this is something we got to move the needle somehow to get people to believe that this is something's going on. And that you were talking about the underwater stuff, and it just made me just go, Atlantis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is, take the fiction side of it out of it. I mean, we don't know. We don't know, because, we can't exist all the way down there underwater.
Well, that's what he said. That's what he said inside of when he was talking to Rogan, he was saying, like, and that's the truth. I think it's like 8% of the ocean has been explored. 8%.
That's insane.
It's insane. So when you think about how much has been, explored in general, what hasn't been explored, then who knows? And the idea, they covered that video that you and I have watched many times over on Rogan. They showed where there's that footage of that thing that they're tracking it for a bit, and then it goes in the water, and then it splits and multiplies into two. You remember that one?
Yeah.
So they showed that one for a little bit. But like more of that stuff and more. And then what Lue talked about, and there was one story. Oh, you didn't, I don't know if did you hear the story he told on Rogan about the Navy SEAL that was climbing up it was a helicopter or a plane, whatever it was. And he was on the ladder, and from under the water, the huge disc underneath him was came out of the water. Oh yeah. And
Jesus.
It's just like they talked about that. They talked. The problem is you can't show Rogan clips, because if you do, they strike it. So I can't show the clip, but you can see it. And they talk about it. You see it on Twitter, at least. And Michelangelo posted it. But between that and the other things, and then what Lue Elizondo did say, and this is the type of stuff that needs to happen at the hearings that we've talked about many times over. Lue talks about how there is 4K, footage, video, like the clear footage of these things. Clear footage, not like the grainy things, like clear footage of these things. There have been reports, and this they talked about with the Ross Coulthart thing, about the guy in the 80s that was pretty much sent on medical leave because of all the things that happened to him because of these UFOs. And it was documented. So if all of these types of reports start to come out and happen at the actual hearing itself, that's when the fit can hit the shan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, the disinformation campaign that is always playing their A game, I think it's the reason why there's only grainy footage of these things is because the general populace will go, nah, it's a this, it's a balloon, it's a bird, it's bird poop, it's blah, 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 right? And they count on the populace as we are now being in the dark, not believing this, science fiction. Just immediately they do not believe, right? But when there's that footage, that's when they grab it. And that's when there's that campaign that probably is hiding it, stifling this, putting it in the vault next to the Ark where Indiana is looking for them. I don't know, but that always seems to make a little bit more sense to me. Is like, why isn't there this footage out there? Because it would blow the roof off. Well, that's the stuff they want.
Yeah, that's the stuff they've been keeping under wraps and talking. And the other thing that I gave, I mean, Lue, not only in his book, obviously, mentions in the Ross Coulthart thing too, they mentioned the companies with Lockheed Martin, all these by name, about officially having these things, working on these programs. And it's that type of stuff that I wonder will come out at the actual hearing itself, which leads to the greater question of, disclosure and will it happen or won't it happen? And so George Knapp, who we talk about on this show all of the time, there's there are a lot of people who are very hopeful about this thing, right? About disclosure. If we go back to our interview with Steve Bassett was convinced that the Schumer Rounds bill is going to get passed again in its form this year. He's convinced that there will be disclosure. Tim Gallaudet, convinced that we'll have disclosure in our lifetime. Lester Nare, who I spoke to, convinced that we'll have it in our lifetime. Lue Elizondo, convinced that we're going to have it in our lifetime. Well, George Knapp made this comment recently when asked about disclosure in general. I think he was talking, I can't remember who he was talking to. I'll play the actual clip itself. This one I think I can play. And George Knapp said this.
And I understand people's frustration, but if you look at the recent history over the last 7 years, we went from no acknowledgement to now the government not only acknowledging it, but creating organizations like AOIMSG, I don't even want to pretend to pronounce it, and later on which turned into the ARROW, and of course before that the UAP task force with one of my colleagues, Jay Stratton, led as the first UAP task force director. The government is responding, and now you have this landmark legislation that has some of it's already been passed in the last couple of years, which was, an incredible milestone to begin with. And now you have more that's being proposed that's about to hit the floor to be voted on. I mean, this is seismic, guys. This is huge. I don't know, what more you need to say, yeah, this thing is real and the government's finally taking it seriously. Now, are we doing as much as we should be doing about it? Absolutely not. And I'm not saying we are. But what I am saying is that we have come a long way in this conversation in just the last 6 years. In fact, I may argue we have come farther in the last 6 years than we have in the last 60 years with regard to disclosure. Now, that's my opinion, but that's my perspective.
Well, I agree. I mean, I've been chasing this stuff for a long time. I never thought I would see this level of change in the topic or it being taken seriously by mainstream media, by Congress, by academic institutions and scientists. It's an amazing transformation. But, for a lot of people, it's never going to be enough until somebody comes forward and admits, yeah, we've been lying. Yes, we've got crash saucers. We've got alien bodies. Thank you and good night kind of a thing, which I'm telling you, I don't think that is ever going to happen. Not willingly. I don't think they're ever going to disclose this unless they're drag kicking and screaming into doing it.
Or George, something happens that forces the conversation, right? An event occurs. So that was one of my concerns and some of my colleagues back in the Pentagon was, look, what if the decision is made for us? What if an event occurs where now all of a sudden the reality is thrust upon everybody to acknowledge and recognize, now what's going to be the excuse? Oh, gee, yeah, maybe we should have told you guys a little earlier. So you're right. And that's what I would call, and my colleagues call the term catastrophic disclosure. I don't think anybody wants catastrophic disclosure. I think most of us want voluntary disclosure.
Well, I want to talk about why they don't make that kind of an unavoidable, undeniable demonstration.
All right, so there you have it. Lue Elizondo talking to George Knapp. And what a conversation between those two. And looking overall with the idea of, we've mentioned on this show many, many times over with catastrophic disclosure, what that could be. And as much as you and I always talk about, yeah, you need to just, these things land in front of the White House and then that's all she wrote. It is all she wrote. It's all she wrote in a lot of different negative ways, unfortunately, also. And they talk about that as much on one of the interviews, where it's like, that's the type of thing that could cause panic right away, right? And I think that Rogan might have made the point, actually, which I agreed with, where if these things in general have been waiting kind of and showing upon however long it is and whatever time means to them, showing, okay, gradual, start talking about us, do this, study this, here's this thing, do that, going under the water, here it is, more and more and more, eventually, okay, fine, now go ahead and tell people what we are, right? Who knows? But just landing and going, if you're going, I'm going to the grocery store. What happened on the grocery store? The world's different now. There's aliens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, so this is what they're talking about inside of this clip. It's like, eventually though, you do have to believe that somebody, whether they're on their deathbed or somebody who's just fed up with it all, just goes, you know what I got? Take this. I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Somebody knows something.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because without disclosure, without any kind of concrete proof other than the blurry videos that we've all seen, or even this footage that Lue was revealed to have released in 2017 with the big article, you know, people just keep classifying it as science fiction, not real. You know, the good news is, though, is they say it in this clip, is that they moved farther along in 6 years than the last 60.
Right.
That's true. It's absolutely true, because now there's more of a groundswell. We do have social media at our fingertips that
right.
This can start spreading and getting more and more people to
they
go.
Can't keep it
I've
silent.
heard about
that. They can't keep it silent the way that they used to, because everybody's voices
Correct.
are too loud on social media.
It is. And so I think the disinformation campaign then kind of turns and goes, well, there are a bunch of crazies online that talk about this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so popular online. What the catastrophic disclosure seems to be where we are. If this stuff is real, if there's a Navy SEAL coming out of the water and there's something following him like a big disc, if there's people looking in the ocean and there is this huge thing as big as an oil rig going by, you know, high def footage of
right.
something there, and us having cameras in our pocket everywhere we go, that seems more likely.
Yeah, well, yes. That's what Lue said on Rogan too. He said, with everybody, with all the cameras and everything that happened, it's just harder and harder to keep this stuff quiet. But like, I want to go back to this quote here by Knapp. For a lot of people, it's not going to be enough until somebody comes forward and admits, yeah, we've been lying. Yes, we've got crash saucers, we have alien bodies, thank you, and good night, kind of thing. Which I'm telling you, I don't think that is ever going to happen. Not willingly. I don't think they're ever going to disclose this unless they're dragged kicking and screaming into doing it, which is bringing forward the conversation itself of, you know, catastrophic disclosure. But also, I agree with him where that's the whole point. It's like this chess game that's been happening like forever, where it's like, no, you know, we're not saying anything. We're not, wait, say what? Who? Sean Patrick, say this. And you say this, you say this. No. Discredit Crush. Do this. Discredit Lue. Hurry, do it. And they're going to keep playing the same game they've been playing for 70, 80 years or whatever it has been. So they're going to keep doing it. He's not wrong until they're going to get to the place where they're going to go, aha, you got me. You know, that's what you're going to have to do, because they did bring up all of the points that we talk about on this show all the time. And I think they're talking about it on Rogan, where they talked about how the amount of lawsuits that would come out of this thing, right? I mean, because Lue had a point of view where he was like, you know, we can get to a place where we're like, oh, all is forgiven, let's just move forward. And that's not, you don't have to, we know that you lied, that's all fine and dandy, but that's not going to happen, right? Because people are going to, he brought up the next point, which is the contractor who says, yeah, you gave Lockheed Martin these other a chance to benefit their company. Our company went bankrupt because we didn't have a chance to build in this. We had people who could have done wonders with this stuff, but we were kept in the dark about it. We're suing you. That's illegal. You can't do that.
Right.
There's religious stuff that is complete. I mean, you look at what he was talking about with the Vatican, how Vatican was like the first like iteration of the CIA. When you look at the way that the stuff that the information and the type of knowledge that they have and the things that they have, if hypothetically, Reilly, all this stuff, let's take the scenario that they just said, where somebody says, okay, yeah, all this stuff exists. We have all the proof. Here it is. The world changes overnight.
Yeah, we want that.
You and I want that.
Yeah.
You and I want that.
We want that.
There's a lot of people, and look, we say that because we talk about this stuff all the time.
What is it that we're learning? I mean, it could be stuff that we haven't even touched on or thought of, and if it comes out, we could be like, "Oh, Jesus."
That's exactly right. I mean, you look at what we were just talking about before with what Lou said about, are they benevolent? Are they, not? Are they? Is there something more to it? Is there something more in general, like, the explanations of stuff? Like, do you second guess certain decisions you've made because of things that you now know? It's like, and this is the other thing that I've said, it's like, because someone said in this, like, would it really make a difference if you found out all this stuff? And I was like, of course it would. It depends. But to quote you, it depends on what it is, right? Because you look at the point that I made, that is a scary point, but it's a point. And that is, you and I talked about it where, like, you and I both think that this stuff has to, and I don't think it's coincidence that they talk about consistently with consciousness and how it relates to what happens to you when you're no longer on this earth, right? All right, well, let me ask you this. Let's say that inside of this report, they say, and this is a conversation I had with Mike Masters when he was on this show. All right, so they say, we have all this information and we can tell you exactly what happens when we're no longer here. And there is life after death. And there is reincarnation, or your energy goes somewhere else, and everybody
wake up in a pod in another solar system.
But everybody lives on, and we know it. We can prove it to you. Well, what happens if you are miserable in this life? What happens if you're having a bad day? And then you go, well, you go, oh, wait a minute. I know that I'm going to wake up somewhere else, or I'm going to do something. I know it for a fact. I was nervous about that before, but I'm not nervous about that anymore because I know for a fact. That's enough to keep things disclosed.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, and not just that, but like the people that believe, that however your belief system shakes out for you, whether it's a different religion or religion, whatever the religion may be, that is now what you're being told that your belief system is incorrect. That is something that's not an easy pill to swallow. I think that you have to consider that. There are a lot of aspects, if that is one of the outcomes, we know what happens after, or is it, there's something out there. We have the evidence to show you. I think that, Lou touches on that secret kind of religious faction behind the scenes and say, oh no, we know what they're demons.
Right. And it's matter of fact type stuff. And it's like but there's also this side of it that they brought up, and I think it was the Rogan interview where he was talking about like the arrogance in this certain group of humans who have this power that decide that they can keep the secrets. It's like, it's not really on them to decide it. We should be, in general, as a society, not just in America, in the world, to say, look, this is what we found out, what we've been doing for the last thousands and thousands of years. It's irrelevant because it doesn't really, because here's what we could do. Here is the next step to our evolution with the knowledge that we now possess, because we know what this is, and we're going to study it together. But it's because of lawsuits. It's because of people going to jail. It's because of having power that this big flaw of what humanity is all about in general is essentially holding us back. Because these people who think, well, we have the information and we've been studying it for 70, 80 years and we've been doing this. It's like, well, what the hell is it? Like, at this point, what is it? And I think I'm so curious. We've talked about this, like that meeting that's happening with these people going, I think our time is done. I think they're going to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Or it's like, no, keep business as usual.
Well, it's business as usual until they can't, like they said, like Lou said, until they're kicking and screaming, being dragged in there. There are so many just hypothetical kind of branches that could happen with all of this. It could cause mass hysteria, could cause a mass whatever you want to call it. When what you reference, like, I'm having a bad day, I know what happens, I'm out, whatever it may be. It's scary to consider. It really is.
Sure, there's
But
a lot of different things. Look,
there's so many different things. But
positive side, right? I think the positive side with energy, right? Like how the world could change. With this positive side also comes a lot of loss of money. Let's say that these things in general, they've studied how this you no longer need oil. You don't need gas to run your cars. You have energy forever. The world can be powered up forever.
That's one outcome. There's be so many people that would get pissed.
Yeah, so many
because they don't want to lose their. I mean, look at big oil, big manufacturers. Come on,
they would turn into Blockbuster, is what it would. They would turn into Blockbuster Video.
People don't even want to talk about an electric car.
I know. But it would be.
We're talking about then. Oh, we can actually zap you to the other end of space and like that. You want to talk about that? Well, what about my Tesla? No. Like, this is insane.
There's a lot. There's a lot more that it's like the amount of information. That's why this gradual type of thing, and it is the progression side of where this information is going. Because as we've talked about it, I've been frustrated with the lack of information, and I think George Knapp or Lou even bring that up in that clip that we just played. That it's like, yes, we get it. We want that information out. You got to realize how much it's progressed in just the last 10 years, whatever, the last 8 years. It's progressed. Sure.
Yeah.
But we're past a point now of going, oh, we can wait that time because all the information that did come out, and because there are people fighting for this thing, now it's like, okay, well, let's do this. Let's put this thing up, because the other side of it is because the more you wait and the more you continue to wait, the bigger the mess is going to be, even after 70, 80 years. Because if all of this stuff, let's say that all this crazy shit that's going on in the world right now with all the wars and everything in general, if at a point in history we know that it wasn't necessary, that there could have been ways to prevent all of this stuff for the amount of, because a lot of times, people will also say that there are probably governments out there that go, you know what, let certain places do themselves away. Let certain, communities do themselves away, which is just inhumane and crazy, but to them, evolution, right?
Sure.
But what if we find out that they're responsible for that thought process? Again, the legacy of certain people goes down the shitter,
Yeah.
And it's like, if you have the opportunity to change the world, they don't want to change the world. They don't want to change society in the way it was, because that's where they feel the disruption will come in.
The disruption, the gains that they might have, if there are people sitting on technology that could change the world, they don't want to lose it. Knapp always said something on his podcast that always just stuck with me, which is like, when you have the secret, that is a commodity. That is something you do not want to give up. Right. And then you consider all the different factions of who would it affect? From big oil to the manufacturers to changing everything. I mean, like I said, I bring it back to just the simple argument between a gas run car and an electric car. Right. That is a hot button political issue right now. Okay, gas car or moving at the speed of light to the end of the universe in no time flat. These are things you can't consider. What are they going to do to people? What could it cause a societal fall?
Right.
Because we have these tenants that we appoint to run everything. Boeing is like, well, they have all these things that they're building in technology. We're making it better for you. Now you can carry around a phone,
right. I tell you, listen, I bring up my mother-in-law, okay? So will wake up in the morning and has her routine. I'm going to get a coffee today. Okay, get your coffee.
She's commenting on my baby pictures.
Perfect.
Her morning routine.
Perfect, right. So she'll comment on the baby pictures. She'll go get a coffee. She'll get a muffin. She'll do what she has to do. And then, and God forbid the coffee place isn't open, and it's like her whole world shuts down. So it's like, okay. So the same thing with people who have that normal, every day, this is what I do. I wake up, I do this, I kiss my significant other goodbye, I go to work, I come back home, I eat dinner, I go to sleep, I leave, I do this. And if that is disrupted in a way of like, well, no, you don't have to do that anymore because we can do this, or you don't have to do that anymore because we can now do this, or you have the capability in your brain, if you study this, to be able to actually do this. This is what humans are capable of. It's like, you think to the first wave of the people who get that information, whether it be our generation, the generation after us, or the generation after them, they are going to have a learning process. It is going to be a curve. Eventually, the goal is that the generations following them within the next 100, 200 years those people are going to be like, yeah, that at some point our ancestors discovered this thing. And that's why we're in the place. But it's got to start somewhere.
And where are you going to start it? I mean, I've heard the idea of like, okay, you're in, Jack the Ripper days, 1600s London, walking around. If you were to pluck somebody out of there and put them into our time, that would be an incredible shock to the system. You know what I mean? So are we talking about the same thing, or are we talking about, no, the iPhone just gets smaller, and it's like you can bend your head around it. No, there is a shock to the system there is going to be a learning curve. That's why, I mean, we always talk about that Soul Foundation doing the gradual release. So you can get, okay, there are crashed. I mean, we can wrap our head around, there's something else out there. We have a crashed craft with non-bio, like with alien DNA or whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's like the next leap. What's after that? They can teleport you across the universe.
All that stuff, travel, energy, that's the stuff that's intriguing. But the stuff that's intriguing to me is, like, as I mentioned, with the evolution of what the human brain is capable of. If we have science that at least investigates that, right? It's not, and as certain, I think that it was in what you might have seen that. I think it was in the Ross Coulthart one, where in the same way that some people's bodies are built better for sports than others, right?
Yeah.
Like so I mean, there are certain things that I can't do that you can do, and there's certain things that you can do, you can't do that I can do, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that the brain for this particular thing that they were talking about with this program, the remote viewing, whatever it was going to be, like, you go in, you see if you're capable of doing that stuff, and you learn how to do it. You're not just like privately found out by the secret little crew that decides you're going to do it. Everybody in society has a shot to figure this thing out. Not everybody can play baseball, but everybody can try. And and it's like, what if that's the other thing that drives me nuts, is that there are people that are being recruited for certain different things of what the human brain is capable of. There are certain people that have to be like sought out, because there's a lot of people that don't even know. And I always talk about this using the sports reference. There's somebody out in maybe not this generation, maybe it was last generation, maybe whenever it was. There was somebody who thought they would be pretty good at baseball or at boxing, right? But decided never to do it. They decided to just go the regular route of whatever they wanted to do, and they were a school teacher, they were a pilot, they were something else. But in another place, another universe, if they decided that they were gonna play baseball, they would have been better than Babe Ruth, right?
Sure.
Process of elimination, that there's enough people out there. There's tons of. I saw tons of talented stand-up comedians and people who could have been really, really good with the dedication, but didn't do it. Had the talent, but didn't have the dedication for it, right? And it's like, you can always and imagine that this program, this remote viewing thing, if you believe that it is, and that the human brain is capable of doing this thing, the amount of people that never tried it because they don't know it exists, they don't even have a chance to even study it. All these different things. Think about the scientists that, as we mentioned before, with those companies, the scientists that don't believe in UFOs, scientists that are out there that don't believe it, but if they've studied it, could tell you more about the smartest people. Imagine, let's say there's someone like a freaking Oppenheimer out there that could study these things, but has never been brought in to even look at it because he doesn't know it exists. The amount of
he became
knowledge,
a baseball player. Who knows,
the amount
right?
of knowledge that you're leaving on the table by not having people aware of this stuff is just insane.
Well, I always say follow the science, and that's what I wish more than anything is like that these things are kind of revealed in a scientific way. We have this evidence. I mean, look at how we turned on the Mexico aliens, how that story kind of shifted and changed as the science developed. But then you have people out there that I bring up the COVID vaccine. I'm not going to go into the politics behind it, but that's what worries me. If that science does come out and is advancing to a certain degree that says, this is what we found and the science says this, there will be people that just, nope, that's not true. They might not believe that. That's why it's such a daunting task to consider all of this, where catastrophic disclosure comes back into the mix, where it's like, all right, whoosh, see what happens.
I know, and I feel like somebody eventually is going to do that. But I think that's why they're trying to get this knowledge out there. That's why they're trying to get these hearings. That's why we're going to try to get, you get Lue. I mean, the rumor was that the Lue Elizondo was the kind of first wave of this stuff, right? Like, past the stuff that happened last year. But you got the James Fox documentary coming out soon. There's another kind of undisclosed documentary. They say it's supposed to change the game. That one is supposed to be one that is supposed to happen this year. You got the hearings, and then you got the Schumer and Rounds thing. We could be having a very different show by the end of the year, or we could be having a show that says, okay, what's next in 2025? Is there anything? I don't know.
It's so crazy.
It's crazy. But anyway, Reilly, as always, man, thank you for joining me on the show here today. Happy to have you back. Where can people find you?
Oh, find me on the internet at Reilly Around, REILLY Around. I'll see you there.
For me, you just find me at Kristian Harloff. As I said earlier, we now have memberships on this channel. We do exclusive content. We do a little bonus stuff for you guys. But it hasn't changed. Monday through Friday, we have videos here, and we have Tuesday, our podcast. Last week, we had Mike Masters on. Actually, last week, we had Lester Nare on. The week before that, we had Mike Masters on. But we're going to have some more special guests coming up very soon. So thanks for joining us here. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're everywhere podcasts are found. So for myself and Mark Reilly, thank you very much. See you later.